Welcome to Podcast IRC, conversations with Indigenous scholars to advance understandings and gain new knowledge, hosted by the Indigenous Research Center at Salish Kootenai College. All right, so that song there was a song sung by Paul Antone and Alli in 1932. It was recorded at that time, and it is just a short clip of what we called like a victory song. And generally, these songs were sung, of course, to note a victory in a battle or a victory in maybe a horse raid in the more recent times, I suppose. But this song was apparently given in an old vision, and it had been used for many years by the Salish, my people here. And when the men would return from their battles, they would be singing these victory songs. And once they reached their camp, they would start completing their circle around the camp, and the people would join in singing this victory song and other songs to kind of note their victories in battle, etc. So this is kind of an important component in today's world because, for one, we don't necessarily go to battle like we did in the past. Of course, we still do have our veterans who serve in the military, but we do have a number of Indigenous folks and tribal folks who accomplish other great deeds. And we have today with us a number of scholars who've completed advanced degrees. And the question that I want to ask for you all today is, in your Western academic training and in the work you do today, what would you consider to be a victory? What would you consider to be a victory in today's academic world? Think on that for a second. Mull it over. Tilt your head to the left a little. Stare out your window. What would be considered a victory for you today, considering your work in Western academics?
Okay, I'll jump in here.
While also considering... Say again, sorry.
I'll jump in here on this. So
yes,
I think I know everyone's a little quiet. It's always tough to get this started. But I think a victory, and this is again kind of a hard one to say because I think we're generally pretty humble, so we don't want to admit to all the things that we've accomplished. But one thing that I can say that just was recent in my just this last week as a victory is we just recruited 5 Native students to University of Montana for graduate work. Some will be in the wildlife department and some will be in range management. And prior to, maybe just a couple months ago, I think these students with COVID and stuff they had some jobs lined up and they had opportunities, which some didn't end up panning out. And so we sort of took advantage of the opportunity to recruit them to graduate school at UM. And so I think that that's a victory because, one, we're just going to continue to populate all of our tribal natural resource departments with educated Indian people to make decisions on behalf of our tribal communities. And I think that that is just a victory because that's really at the heart of tribal sovereignty.
I wish we had a clapping background noise because I would have pressed that, Sarah.
Thanks. Or snapping.
Sarah, will you introduce yourself, just your name and your title?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Sarah Hoagland. I work with the USDA Forest Service, and then I'm also up at Salish Kootenai College in the Indigenous Research Center. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob, do you want to go ahead and go?
Sure. Dr. Rob Smith, Associate Professor of Computer Science at the University of Montana. So I think there are kind of standards like tenure or grants awarded, that sort of thing. I think me personally, I think I would consider a victory any opportunity to advance knowledge and to help others attain understanding or stature that they wouldn't have otherwise. So I think the advancement of others is pretty important to me personally, as well as just sort of what's out there for everyone in terms of knowledge and trying to discover something new.
I like that.
Okay, Dr. Thomas, what are your thoughts about that?
So Dr. Aaron Thomas, Associate Professor, University of Montana, Chemistry Department, Director of Indigenous Research and STEM Education. I was thinking about this question was posed earlier this morning, and I think one of the, victories for, Western education is really opportunity. So there are opportunities for students from wherever they happen to be to get a higher education degree. Now, I know there are challenges with that. I know that it's not perfect. I know that access is also an issue. But if you wanted a higher education degree in, really any field, there are tribal colleges, there are community colleges, there are state institutions, there are private institutions. There's just opportunity no matter where you are to have a chance to study these fields and go really as far as you want. So that to me would be a victory.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Renee, do you have any thoughts on that?
Renee Schmitz, environmental science instructor at Sitting Bull College. Well, I work at a tribal college, so I think that a lot of the tribal college influences what I have, what I think a victory would be, and a lot of it is related to student success and whether or not I can help students join their interest in science with their desire to help their communities and also learn more about their culture. And I guess that's kind of like would be a personal victory too, is when I'm able to do a research project that's beneficial to my tribe. But it's very important for me to try to help students not just finish a degree, but to help them, like I said, make a connection between their job and their community and culture, and to be successful after they graduate. And I hope I'm somewhat victorious in helping students become future leaders. That sounds a little bit ambitious, but that would be nice to see students actually progress and have their own personal successes while it's still remaining tied to the culture. And I guess that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Renee. I do think, seeing that success is an award in itself and an achievement, I think, for all of us who have been in higher education. That's one of the things I know that keeps me around. And so being able to see that in your own students and students you have mentored and taught in your classrooms. Mr. Aaron Bryn, would you like to go?
Aaron Bryn, NAS faculty, Salish Kootenai College, research coordinator for the Indigenous Research Center.
Okay, Aaron, I know you have something to add to this.
I don't know. You challenged me. Now I'm not gonna say. No, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about this kind of a lot on some of our other episodes of the podcast. So I would say forms of victory. It's hard because I've been taking some L's lately in terms of academics. So, so I'm not very optimistic. No, I think too, we need to kind of quit. I think in Indian country, there's a notion that you have to leave home to be successful too. And that's still kind of perpetuated, which I don't think is true anymore. I think that we have to start teaching people that in any situation, they can be successful. Mm-hmm. If the right type of application is applied, but also I think that we can't let others define what victory is for ourselves. Once we do that, it kind of seems like we give up a little bit of some sort of freedoms, I guess. I don't know. So, but we should never forget that, like, in terms of deeds and accomplishment in Indian country, the actual war deed itself is still probably the highest form of accomplishment in that sense. So, but yeah, that's about it. Stop.
So I know that this situation that we're all in has us, there's a lot of negative aspects to it or isolating aspects to it, but to be able to get together with your colleagues that you would normally just be able to have conversations with, this has worked. I've appreciated them. So I was excited to have this conversation with you all today because first of all, I miss seeing your faces, and second of all, I know that we all have something to learn from each of your experiences. And so just to wrap up that last question, thinking about access, personal achievements, sometimes we're not always in our own eyes or in somebody who's judging our work successful, but even just having a seat at the table, I think, is also a victory for each of us. I really appreciated Sarah's comment about tribal nation building and sovereignty. I think that is also a huge victory for us. And so just continue to work at providing success or support to students like Renee talked about, is only going to result in more victories for American Indian people in academia. So, does anybody else have anything to add to that, the victories?
I guess one thought on this is Aaron was mentioning sort of an individual definition of success, or how that could vary from person to person or situation from situation. I think this is a theme that comes up a lot, and one strategy that I think helps is to pin ourselves down as individuals to define what success means, and then it's not that that's set in stone. It can change if we learn something or if circumstances change, but I think it helps our peers especially to know what's important to us and to provide. It's one of these things where if you anticipate that they will want some sort of a criteria to not to measure us, but to have an idea of how we're doing, we can either choose to provide that or choose to let them fill in the blank. And I think that it's dangerous personally to not have a definition of that for myself, because then it can be something that I can sort of trot out as an excuse every time I miss the mark. I just say, well, that's not my definition of success, and just kind of rotate off of it infinitely. And I think in this life, we have one life to live. You got to sort of pick what you want to spend it on, and then hold yourself accountable to that. Because even if you don't hit the mark, that's your own mark, you can learn something from that. And that doesn't have to be a failure. Even if you don't hit the goal for success, you learn how to improve. And I think that's pretty important, because at the end of the day, it's kind of easy to fool our active brain, but our internal brain, it's a lot harder to fool, and it can cause a lot of anxiety and distress if we're kind of living a sham and we don't hold ourselves accountable to something. So
yeah, I think that is really important to identify our own levels, our own definition of success, especially when the backgrounds that we come from definitely look at success from a different perspective than some of the institutions that we work for. I know Willow's been doing some work around defining or trying to understand how we measure success and what we as American Indian people see as success. So I think, just more focus on that and almost taking the ownership back to that definition for ourselves as well is really important. thanks, Rob, for sharing. For sharing that. Okay. Topic 2. In the current state, how does victory and success look in the future? So when Shandit and I were trying to prepare questions for today's discussion, we were thinking about the current situation of the fall semester at each of our institutions, and all of us are kind of in a different scenario at each of the institutions. And so thinking about what success is to you and victories are to you, how will those change, or how will they look maybe different? How will you redefine success for yourself in this upcoming transition that is still pretty unknown? I mean, I know most of our institutions have set what they're going to do for fall, but it could change at a day's notice. So just thinking about the future and how you will define a victory and success.
Take it away, Aaron Bren.
You better just call on someone, Salita.
Oh, God.
You have to start pointing fingers.
Okay.
We're shy.
Renee.
Sorry, could someone else answer? Just because my mind was wandering while you were speaking. And I knew you were going to call on me first.
I know, that always happens to me.
I was like, wait.
Brutal honesty. I love it.
Yes, honesty is important. How about, no, nobody else answered. And do you need me to repeat any of it?
Give us the short version of the question.
Oh, that was the problem. Long-windedness. Okay. Victories and success, what do they look like in this new era for us?
Are you talking more about like what's going on nationally? Or are you just talking about just the world?
That's a good question. We just said the current state. So I think we could talk, because we're talking about academia and success and victories in that realm, I think that's where we were trying to focus on. But of course, like these conversations, like in all of these conversations, whatever you feel like sharing is important to hear.
I think in terms of what's going on and just for academics and COVID, I think just making it through is will be a huge victory, just without pulling our hair out and all that, because teaching online is tough, at least for me. And then the whole mission behind a tribal college is like one-to-one learning and in person, and it's born out of the VOTEC, the trade school kind of mentality, which is like applied knowledge and kind of boots on the ground kind of mentality. So for us to be successful in what's going on right now would be, it's hard because it's also, we're asking a lot of our students, because they by choice, they have chosen an institution that doesn't teach that way for a reason, so I sympathize mainly with students and over the institutions themselves, partly because, man, we're asking them to pay the same amount of money to go to school and do what we're asking, but yet we're not giving them what they chose our institution for. So, and on that, just trying to make it and wonder, like, at least for our institution, tribal colleges are a little more fragile in terms of finances. So we can't afford to lose students, and we can't afford to lose kind of the momentum that's created at tribal colleges. So, but I'm optimistic.
I think we need to be.
I'm not. I'll be honest, I'm not. I have yet to see anything that's impressed me about decision making around COVID, and I'm sorry to say that, but
don't be sorry.
Someone said something earlier, and I don't want to point fingers, and I certainly don't want to get in trouble, but someone said something earlier about how things keep changing in ways that are unpredictable, and I think that at some point it's a leader's responsibility to take a stand on something and then try their best to insulate their subordinates. Maybe that's a carryover from my time in the military, but I have not seen a preponderance of people who are willing to do that. And I'll generalize this in academia. I'm not specifically talking about specific people or specific institutions. That's my indemnity clause. But yeah, and I think that's a real unfortunate thing. So, for example, students pay for a certain service, and when that gets changed last minute, it's really hard as an instructor for me to provide the same quality. And so I kind of have to scramble around to try to make something equivalent. Well, is it really surprising when things get changed at the last minute this fall? Speaking of something as if it's already happened, it's not guaranteed, but it's highly likely. And then you ask, well, why are things the way they are? And it's, well, because we need them to be, because there are financial constraints. And if we don't meet them, we're in big trouble. Okay, but how does that have anything to do with reality and what's actually going to happen? So can we get out in front of things and say, given the most likely outcome, what's the best arrangement we could have? And then make a call and stick to it, instead of let's pretend that things aren't as they are. And now we all know how that's going to end. And so I expect that nationally, we're going to see a lot of institutions get shut down permanently. I think that's going to happen. And so given that, what is the best move forward? The writing's been on the wall about online education for years now. What have institutions done about it? They've pretended it doesn't exist. That was their solution. And so how is this going to all pan out? I don't know, but I don't think it's going to be pretty. Sorry, I didn't have coffee this morning.
I appreciate your long-windedness.
Mm-hmm.
I can relate.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what you had to say in regards to leadership was reminding me of a lot of what you had to say about success and how we have to, at some point, define it for ourselves, right? And so going into this next phase of our academic year, some of it might be what we have to define as what we're willing to do in our research, in our classrooms, in our Moodle platforms, just like saying, okay, this is what I'm going to offer this semester and this is how I'm going to proceed regardless of last minute decisions. I know that's easy to say right from where I'm sitting, but that was my thinking as you were sharing that, Rob. Do you guys have any other thoughts about that?
I guess as Rob and Aaron were talking, I was thinking about the degree of uncertainty and the unstable foundation and the changing dynamics from one guidance to another guidance. That just creates so much stress and anxiety, and it basically comes down to the fact that we're in a system that isn't resilient to begin with, and can't, like you were saying on our earlier call, Rob, going to the event that you went to in preparation for something like this, and the conclusion was that we aren't prepared for this. And so I think it's just pointing out that we weren't quite built in a resilient way, or as resilient as we might have thought we were, I guess. And then just to speak personally about this question, a lot of the work that I am thankful to be able to do is a lot of tribal engagement type stuff. And, we're not able to meet in person with our tribal partners and collaborators now. And so it's completely changed the way that we work. And I think that this will really be a defining period moving forward, like how we can actually adapt in this time and how we can maintain those relationships in a pandemic. But I'm trying to be optimistic like Aaron Brand too, but it's hard. It's really hard.
I think there's a sense of urgency that institutions aren't adhering to, at least some institutions that.
A sense of, I think he said urgency.
Urgency, yeah.
Thanks, Aaron. Such an urgent.
Sounds like he's in a dangerous situation.
Oh, he's moving now.
Oh, it was. I quit talking.
Oh,
you did with urgency?
Yeah, well, because I know when my internet goes out.
Okay.
All I said was urgency, and then it went out, and then I just stopped.
Smart.
No, I was thinking about this, I mean, because we can't help but kind of talk about leadership in this time. And Native people have always viewed like um, the qualities of a leader and the qualities of ceremony in times of uncertainty, right? Like, what do we do when crisis happens? And I think, in terms of how I do research, and a lot of us in Indian country that focus on Indigenous research, a lot of it has to do with how we apply tribal knowledge to whatever topic it is we're doing. So I know, at least in Crow, we've lost 8 elders in a month and a half.
Oh my gosh.
So, and to give you an example, I'm in the middle of going in through a IRB process with the university, and it's so clunky and so slow. And two of the people that I potentially could have spoke to have died in that amount of time. And so it's like, well, there has to be some mitigation to that. Like, are we going to continue with this really like drawn out long process? I just feel like people act naive to the importance of some of that stuff. We talk a lot about the importance of that, and a lot of my success is predicated on my connection with elders, because that's like my whole job. That's what I do other than teach, right? Is I collect stories. And so if they're not around, what am I to do? So and that's not just me. There's everyone's relying on that. So what Rob was saying, I wish he would have pointed fingers. No, just kidding. But I think I agreed with him a lot about how I've been very disappointed in terms of decision making and some of that. So that's my 2 cents. That's just me on my soapbox. Stop.
No, it's not stop. Sorry, I didn't. I just think that's really important to hear, though. I mean, it's the hard truth of what's happening right now, and it's affecting us at every stage, at our professional stage, when we're supposed to, when we're supposed to be connecting with our communities, at a personal stage that's connecting all of us. There's so much loss and fear around what's happening. I just think I appreciate you bringing that to this conversation, eh? Dr. Belcourt, now that we can hear you.
Sure. Dr. Annie Belcourt, professor at the University of Montana in pharmacy and public health. Yeah, I was just been thinking about the discussion, and I think in terms of like victories or strengths, I think that we could potentially share right now are the sort of elements of compassion that we have within our culture, not only for other people, but for ourselves and for our families and for our communities. And I think that that's one of the things that we need the most right now, is for people to start caring about each other. And, right now, we just have such a culture nationally of discard, and it's so, I have to say, it's depressing to see that people are willing to put, profits and different things over lives. And, I've talked about this, but, just locally here, the schools talking about going back and having no idea how they will do that safely for children. And coming from, a public health perspective, it's just really, it's not a good thing to try to do this right now. There's no way that I can see that it's going to benefit people other than economically, in terms of like having people keep their jobs, which is important. I get that. And it's very concerning to me, especially for Indian families and children, because they are most at risk. Let's face it, like the mortality rates are not good for Native people here in Montana and throughout the country. And people don't care. And that's the biggest issue that I'm seeing right now, is that just people can't even be bothered to wear a mask, And, I just didn't really think that I would live in a day and a time where I would see such vitriol and like hatred, just openly displayed. And maybe, I don't think that's unique to Missoula or anything like that, but to see that and to try to be like, oh, let's focus on teaching this class and doing this thing and writing this paper, it's really challenging. And I don't pretend that I'm doing it well because it's, I think that we're all sort of struggling to, maintain, and it's not about the well, it is in a way, but it shouldn't be about the politics. It should be about saving people's lives, and if we are months away from having wide distribution for a vaccine, then we should wait for that. And that's, I think, where I come to. And so this whole thing just seems like insane to me. But, again, that's me. And, and having, daughters and, a niece and who are very, vulnerable to all of this, it just really makes for a difficult thing. So I share the concerns about leadership. I think we should all be sort of outraged and angry and concerned right now, because I don't think this is a time for us to sit back and pretend that nothing's happening and that people aren't going to lose their lives, because that's exactly what's happening and will happen. I mean, that's where I came to compassion. I mean, just as human beings, like, it shouldn't dictate how we breathe and how we, our hearts beat and different things. That shouldn't have anything to do with politics, and our lung function and whatnot. Like, that shouldn't have anything to do with politics. It should have everything to do with common sense and science and medical literature and medical thought. And to see a time where that's like being ostracized and everything. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, it is. And I can't support, decisions that they're going to end people's lives. And that's what we're proposing. And also with online learning, I think it can be fine, but most of, many of our Native families, let's be honest, don't have access the same way to those resources that others do. They don't have great internet connection. They don't have multiple devices. And
Well, you bring up a good point about Native families not having a lot of the what's needed to do this, because we actually ran into that with SKC. Not just that, what was happening was everyone was just going to the parking lot of a few of the buildings on campus and using the Wi-Fi, which then kind of defeated the purpose of people not being in contact, because everyone is getting out and visiting and talking. Or if one phone connected better than another, everyone would kind of huddle around that, and then here we are trying to teach a lesson, and then it just seems kind of pointless. I do agree with you. I never really thought about it, but if the vaccine is close, why not just forego and just be err on the side of caution? I like that idea. It would probably never happen, but I like your style.
Well, I think in this situation, it's a great case study in complexity and how things are way more complicated. So we go through and we have almost the same day every day, right? There's some variation, but it's pretty much the same from day to day. But that doesn't mean that life is simple, and it doesn't mean that the things happening or that could happen are simple either. And what happens is we kind of get used to being in this rut of every day is the same, and then something comes out of left field and blasts us away because no one was expecting it. And what it reveals is that the way that we do things on a daily basis, it's not based in reason and in science and in medicine and all these things that Annie was talking about. It is based on, well, this is kind of the way I wish things were, or let's just assume everything's going to be the same every day. And what happens is we make these decisions, and then in the fine print, like Aaron was saying, we got people out in the parking lot, not social distancing, and that's the solution. And I think it comes back to the leadership question, because not everybody is going to understand, for example, the way the vaccines work, the way the vaccine discovery process works, that was a lot of the discussions I was part of in this group that I mentioned, I guess, for the purpose of the podcast, a pandemic response roundtable I was a part of last fall before COVID happened. And there are massive challenges in discovering and testing and deploying. So even manufacturing vaccines is really hard. It's really hard to get all these pieces together in a way that's safe and in a way that's affordable. But effectiveness is a big problem too. So it's kind of the trifecta. Anyway, the point with this is that in the history of modern science, the fastest vaccine was 4 years. And that was sort of a miracle when it happened. And it was with a pathogen that was much easier to solve than COVID. And so, you mix all this together and you get yourself in some tricky questions that are hard. And they don't have easy answers. And you have to say, well, given these constraints that we can't really mitigate, what's the best path forward? And that's when you really need a leader or a group of leaders, in this case, to stand up and say, look, looking at all the facts and looking at the probabilities of what could happen, here's the best path, and it's going to hurt a lot of people, but it is the least hurtful path if you look at it, It's challenging. But if someone's just going to pretend like it's business as usual, you'll never get to that point, and it'll just create much more suffering.
Gosh, I realize we're running out of time, and I've also been sucked into everything that you've all been saying, because there's things that, I think because we wake up and do the same thing over and over, I'm not stopping and thinking about this kind of stuff. So just to hear all of your perspectives is really important, and it's important for other people for us to create that space for other people too in our own leadership. So does anybody else have anything to add before we wrap up this session?
Yeah, thanks, Selena, for guiding those important conversations. And, we're just really fortunate to have the opportunity to get a little bit of input from these native scholars, these Indigenous scholars who are working in the forefront of education of our Native students, both at the university level and at the tribal college level. And it's important, I guess, really to frame this idea of a victory, whether it's a personal victory or maybe a victory for our communities, or maybe even, just to see a victory or a small success in the students that we interact with. But either way, we're in an odd time right now where things are not usual, and it's really important to reflect back on those, and also really refocus, or really begin to understand that a victory is it can be achievable, and it's just something that we have to keep striving toward. And as long as we can understand what that victory might mean across different institutions and among different disciplines that our fellow Native scholars have entered into, I think that will make us stronger, both as Native people, but also intertribally, because we do work with and work among different tribal groups and with different tribal students. So really important conversation that I wish we had more time to engage with these scholars. But again, thank you all for taking this small amount of time to impart your wisdom, if you will, or your experiences. And we hope that our listeners will gain something from this, and it'll advance us forward as we approach devising this research methodology that's going to work for our Indigenous people and Indigenous students. So again, thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode, and to learn more, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at IRCSKC. You can find us also on Facebook and YouTube by searching SKC Indigenous Research Center. You can also visit our website at irc.skc.edu. Don't forget to join us next time as we continue our discussions on Indigenous research, Indigenous research methodologies, and Indigenous worldviews.